they put master blender on my business card, but I'm not really sure. I mean, I blend the stuff. At no point ever did I pass a class or like get some designation or whatever. I just kind of liked it.
Dixon Dedman is the founder and master blender of 2XO and the former founder of Kentucky Owl. In this conversation, we talk about how he learned the craft without formal certifications and what actually matters when you're building something over time. This isn't a bottle review. It's a conversation about craftsmanship, patience, and the long road it takes to do something well. I'm Brian, and this is Foolproof Life. Let's get into it.
Well, my name is Dixon Dedman. So the blender 2XO, founder of 2XO. In my previous life, I founded a brand called Kentucky Owl. That was a family, kind of a family passion project that turned into something a lot bigger than I had anticipated. But more than anything, I think I'm just kind of a normal dude that lives in Kentucky and tries to keep 3 kids alive and not get in too much trouble on the regular with my wife. So that's
I get it.
yeah.
So let's just take this back a little bit. Your family has been in whiskey. I mean, your family founded a distillery back in the late 1800s.
My family has a lot of deep roots in whiskey with about a 100-year hiatus in there. So it's actually it's a really cool story. My great grandfather, who's had this fabulous name, his name was Charles Mortimer Dedman. And when he was about 6 years old, he had a sister, and they lost both their parents. Both their parents passed away. And he was adopted by his aunt and uncle, his father's sister and her husband. And it just so happened, so they adopted them and raised them as their own. But his uncle was a gentleman named Judge William McBrayer. And William McBrayer was the county judge executive of Anderson County, Kentucky, which is home of Four Roses Distillery, Wild Turkey Distillery. It's just north of the town that I grew up in, Mercer County. So he was a county judge executive, but he also owned, at one point, he owned 3 different distilleries in Anderson County. The biggest of which was called Cedar Brook. Cedar Brook was a kind of one of the major pre-Prohibition era mid to late 1800 distilleries, a massive operation. But when my great-great-grandfather got married in 1876, he was gifted the land and the funds to build his own distillery. And he actually was a graduate of Northwestern University and a pharmacist by trade, but he built and had an operational distillery on the banks of the Kentucky River from it became operational in 1879 until Prohibition. And so he, he's a pharmacist in town and had this little side hustle, and the flagship product, that out of that distillery, they did a bunch of contract distilling, but he also he made a product called Kentucky Owl. And so that was that was kind of how I find myself where I am is just because of a wedding present almost 150 years ago, I guess.
Yeah. Wow.
So when C.M. Dedman got married in 1876, his adopted father gave him the land and the funds to build the C.M. Dedman distillery, which became operational in 1879. Yeah, I mean,
got it. So you got
we got plates and stuff when we got married. No one gave me a distillery. But.
Yeah. So take us forward to the point where you're thinking about starting a distillery. I've heard some other interviews with you, and you said this has been talked about in your family for a long, long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of neat to have this little bit of history. I have a lot of history in my family, and I was kind of carrying on a different tradition in my family in the hospitality business, the Beaumont Inn, and the restaurant and hotel side of things. But it was just kind of always this like cool piece of the history. We had this bourbon distillery, we had this brand, and my grandfather's line was always, when he won the lottery. It wasn't if, it was when he won the lottery. The first thing he was going to do was to resurrect this family bourbon brand. And unfortunately he passed before those numbers came in. But, again, it was like it was always this kind of this thing, like one day, that would be such a cool thing to do. And, I kind of fell in love with bourbon at a younger age than I should probably admit. And, it became part of what, my legacy at the end was to create, I created a bourbon bar, and we kind of, we were kind of on the cutting edge, front edge of, hosting all of these bourbon when bourbon tourism kind of took off,
Uh-huh.
the late 90s, early 2000s, we kind of jumped on that, and we're a big part of that. And so it just kind of, I just got to a point I thought, this is just too cool to have this in the, have this story and to be passionate about this. And I would just love to try to figure out how to make this happen. And I think, I was young enough and dumb enough and confident, overly confident, and thought, let's take a run at this.
Yeah. But distilleries are kind of expensive to start. I mean, this is not a cheap endeavor.
True, but keep in mind I did not build a distillery. One of the things that we did, and it was a very different time, because what we did is what everybody is doing now, but when we did it, it was like very taboo. Like, 15, 20 years ago, if you were an NDP, if you didn't distill your own product, then you were you were cheating, or,
Yeah. You weren't legit.
You're right. Right. So we kind of, I think we were kind of on the part of that front where the perception of what source liquid that is blended properly can be, it can actually stand up to and is appropriate for this industry, and it doesn't just have to be stuff that came off that still and aged in that rickhouse and went into that bottle.
Sure.
So, I mean, it was expensive. Don't get me wrong. Your point, but I didn't, never have, don't ever intend to build a distillery.
Oh, I get it. So you went into the NDP space. It wasn't really a big thing back, and like it was taboo. I'm sure people were sourcing, but it wasn't talked about.
I think there was a little bit out there. It wasn't that big a deal. It was just funny, like when we launched Kentucky Owl and we told the story of what it was, and I was bringing back this family brand, and we were doing all this stuff, and everybody says, well, where's your distillery? And I said, well, I'm buying stuff, and then I'm rebarreling it, and then I'm kind of playing with it during maturation, and I'm doing all this different stuff, and then I blend it, and initially it was like, that, that's just a fancy way of saying you're buying MGP product and put it in your bottle and saying it's yours. And I was like, well, that we went through the whole thing. I don't own anything from Indiana. I never will. These batches have 5 different distillates. I've double barreled, 80% of this stuff. It's all barrel, so it took a long time to kind of see the general American whiskey consumer come around to believing that you can do something pretty special, and it doesn't necessarily have to be ripping right off the historic still.
Well, your juice spoke for itself.
I just want you to see that I've got
Sweet.
my
Thank you. So glad you like it.
I love it.
I didn't know this until recently, but Mark and Sherry were your partners with you, but you started it with them in some way, shape, or form, right?
100%. Yeah. I mean, that is another example, as far as I'm concerned, of just how, how life just presents things, like, wow, and I've known Mark my entire life. Mark, so I think I mentioned, I was in my family in the hospitality business at an inn, and it's kind of it's a thing of the past now, kind of the historic small boutique hotel that's independently owned and operated, not part of a chain or whatever.
Not a Hampton, Hilton, or something.
Yeah. So starting in the 70s, they organized this kind of national organization of small independent inns to kind of market and partner up. And before, it didn't take very long. And Mark Carter had the Carter House Hotel up in Eureka, California, in the Redwoods in Northern California. And my dad, and they connected, hit it off. Mark is just one of the most entertaining, energetic, those people you'll ever meet. My dad and Mark were vice president of this organization for 25 years, traveled all over the world together. I traveled over the country, all over the world. Mark he just kind of show up out of nowhere. Like, we'd be at Keeneland as a family one day, and then it's like, hey, there's Mark. Oh yeah, he's here for a couple days to stay with us. Or, like we're at we're somewhere in Arizona. It's like, hey, look, there's Mark. And So I had this idea of creating Kentucky Owl, resurrecting Kentucky Owl, kind of idea of how I thought best to do it, and had reached out to some of the people in the industry that ended up helping me secure liquid and introduce me to the right people. But what I found as a full-time busboy, chicken fryer, dishwasher, whatever, is like there were things that I was comfortable and felt confident I could do. But then there were all these aspects, like the legal aspects of the whole thing, getting the TTB, the cola, sourcing the glass, barcodes, the blah, 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 all that stuff. And I was just, and I just had no idea how to navigate that red tape. And I had no idea how I would find somebody that could help me do that. And we were at an innkeepers conference in Austin, Texas. Like my wife and I are just standing there, and I look up, and here bouncing across the
There's Mark
room,
again.
glass of red wine in hand. Here comes Mark Carter. He's like, oh, so that led to a conversation. I was like, this is really what what I want to do. And it started with, but that's where it ended was, and he said, I make custom wine for people all the time. He's like, I've got a team that can handle all that TTB, the cola stuff. We work with glass purveyors, label printers. He's like, that's what you're worried about? And I was like, yeah, that's what I'm worried about. And honestly, as you can imagine, the way all these things happen, like we have this long conversation into the night, which was, a lot of fun. I woke up the next morning and my wife was like, you and Mark, you all had this plan hatched last night. Like, I tell you guys were out of control. Like, what? You guys were all over the place. And I was like, Elizabeth, I'm serious about this. Like, we're going to do it. And she's like, Mark's not even going to remember half this conversation or whatever. Like, meet him at breakfast. I was like, Mark, he's like, oh, we're in. He's like, we're doing this.
Nice. The Kentucky Owl was born.
Yeah. So, it was, I think that what was cool, Mark, I don't know if a lot of people know this about Mark. Mark might have one of the most amazing wine palettes of anybody I've ever, he's in the wine game,
that.
obviously. He's got Carter Cellars, he's got Envy Winery, he's got all that stuff. But like in terms of his wine palette is absolutely out of this world. And he is so amazing. He's encyclopedic. He's like, you're going to have the baked chicken, then you need to have this white burgundy from here because he's master somm if he ever wanted to be a master somm, but he doesn't have the attention span, I think, to take the test. But he's incredible. So watching and kind of going through the development of their kind of initial introduction to whiskey and palate and taste and profile and why is this like this and what does this do? I think back on those times with them. That was just so much fun.
Can I ask, were they actually business partners in the venture?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's awesome. It's amazing.
Yeah, Sherry's an artist, so and of course they're no longer, I think, together.
Yeah, they're not a couple.
But Sherry, she's incredible. She kind of took the original Kentucky Owl label, and we all agreed like not to make a lot of edits. We wanted it very similar to what it was, except the original owl on the first label, from the 1800s, 1900s. It looked like a fluffy field mouse, and I was like, we need something with some talons, like some claws, like we need a bird of prey on here. But we kind of all had our roles in that, and it was great.
Well, what changed people's opinions, right? Like I've only been in this about 7-8 years, really, like into whiskey, but you just can't deny when juice is good. When it's good, it's good. And like Old Carter, fantastic product. Like I've never had a bad Old Carter. It was pretty good. And then I've had, my God, Old Carters. That's all I've ever had. I've never had a bad one. And your juice, your product, when Kentucky Owl, I remember sitting there with a buddy of mine, Greg, and it was batch 3. It was the rye. And we were just floored. We're like, this is as good as Thomas Handy and other stuff that we chased, right? And we were new to this. We're 3-4 years in this and still figuring it all out. But like, it wasn't a cheap bottle, but it was amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't care where it came from.
Yeah, that's the big I would say that in terms of the Kentucky Owl questions, like a lot of it is obviously are trying to get like me to tell some dirt on some stuff. And the other one is like, where did the rye come from? And, which is really funny. I mean, I still, I don't know. I have a
Really?
guess, but I really don't know.
Yeah.
That was, I think I've told this story before. It was not very long after I entered into that relationship with Stoli. And it's kind of funny because one of the first things they did was tell me about all of this bourbon they had bought for me to work with. And I started tasting it and I was like, okay, wait. Finally, I was like, I need specs on this stuff because this is not, I don't even think this is bourbon. I think this is, and come to find out it was all a bunch of Dickel. And I was like, guys, what are we doing here? Like, I can't put Kentucky Owl, Tennessee bourbon whiskey. Like, that's not going to work on the
Didn't
label.
work.
So
Yeah.
that was initially I was like, okay, we're kind of, this is the way it's going to go. But, and then, I got this sample. It's like, hey, and it didn't come through still. It came through a broker and it was rye and it was, like 2 or 3 samples, like a 9-year-old barrel, a 10-year-old barrel, and an 11-year-old barrel. All it said was 95.5 Kentucky rye whiskey. And what I found out was that it was being stored in Canada. I think it had been like a test, like somebody made a big run of rye and then decided not to do anything with it. So they ended up selling it, or parking it up there in Canada, and they were going to just put it in a Canadian blended whiskey or something like that.
Sure.
And somebody stumbled onto it and they were selling it. It was in barrels, but they were selling it they were kind of trying to sell it by the proof gallon, which was sometimes kind of shady because, they weren't dumping the barrels. So we didn't know the proof gallons. They were just kind of, so like there was a whole bunch of funky stuff with that. But I basically tasted it and said, okay, they were like, we think they're around, I don't know what it was, 30 something thousand proof gallons of this stuff.
Okay.
We're willing to sell about 10. And I was like, okay, I'll take all of it. And they told me the price. And I was just like, it was dirt cheap, not dirt cheap, but it was very cheap. And I basically went back and I negotiated the whole deal really without ever having talked to Stoli about it. I was just spending, I was like, well, I'm going to make this happen. I basically went back and I was like, I'll give you, I think it was like $30 more a proof gallon, but we want every drop of it that you have. And they were like, okay, we can do that. And so then I had to go back to Stoli and I said, hey, I'm going to need you to wire this money over here. and it was kind of crazy because then they didn't want to, all the stuff about getting the barrels back across and then wanted to ship it in totes and I didn't want it in totes. And then we got the barrels and most of the barrels, like the heads were spray painted. So you couldn't see like the markings on it was a little bit crazy, but I love the stuff. I mean, I absolutely love the stuff.
The product really was amazing. So tell me a little bit about, you left Kentucky Owl, and you can talk as much or as little as you want about that. But, when you left there, and did you know you wanted to start another brand? Were you like, I'm going to do something else?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I loved it. I loved, I truly, honestly, never, in my mind, I was going to do Kentucky Owl for the rest of my life until I handed it over to my children. Then things just, again, things just happen. And I think that, I think the pandemic played a significant role in that. The kind of mothership of the Stoli organization and they kind of changed the whole company. I mean, there for a while, it was this US based company that was kind of this incubator for brands. And then that proved to be too expensive because they did silly stuff like get downtown Manhattan real estate for the offices and whatever. So they moved everything back over back in, and the decisions were being made. People in Luxembourg and things like that. And we're having conversations about what I felt like was a brand, an industry, and et cetera, that they really had no understanding of or whatever. And I just got to the point where I felt like the things they wanted me to do, the things that they thought were innovative, were outside the box, were exciting, were interesting, were not in line with what I thought was the right direction for the brand, and and for me. And I'm very protective of what I put my name on and what I and it just, so it was fun. It just time for
Time
a
to go.
change.
Time to
And
go.
so it's a lot. It's a great experience, and I decided that I want to do this again, but very differently, in the sense that we were kind of one of the first on the scene to do this kind of heritage play, tell this story, this historic
Uh-huh.
story, an old looking bottle, blah, 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 old this, old that. Everything is, got to look like it's, it should have been on the back bar at Tombstone, and everybody was following suit, doing all that stuff. And, that's generally when I say, hey, I want to go in a different direction. And so, I wanted to make a brand that was really about and told the story of the liquid in the bottle. And I think what makes 2XO very unique is that it is a unique approach to getting liquid to the bottle. I was fortunate enough to partner with some guys who worked with me at Stoli, who thought that this whole whiskey thing was a lot of fun, and they wanted to come on this little journey with me. And they're very talented and very it's kind of a great, I don't know, like the checks and balance for my crazy ideas. And they're like, hey, dial it back, lunatic. But one of the guys on my team helped, he worked for Diageo for a long time. He helped Tom Bullitt launch Bullitt.
Mhm.
Another guy was instrumental in kind of the development of the Johnny Walker's new marketing campaign. So these guys are seasoned vets in the industry, and so we kind of took off. We partnered with Prestige Beverage Group out of Minnesota, because they had access to liquid, and we could plug it right into their distribution
Sure.
network. And
Makes perfect sense.
all of this stuff is just, I mean, again, it's just another situation where I like pinch myself for how it kind of comes together and happens. But, so I think it's pretty amazing what we've done in, 3 years with this brand. And because I think about what I did in 3 years with Kentucky Owl. And granted, the first 3 years it was just Mark and Sherry and I. But I mean, in 3 years we made a name for ourselves, I guess, to a
You
certain
have.
extent. But
Yeah.
we, well, with the first 3 years of Kentucky Owl, but we sold, I don't know, maybe 6,000-7,000 bottles.
Yeah. I want to talk more about 2XO, Dixon. I'm going to interject a second and say, this episode is brought to you by Bottle to Bond, which is my company and a travel glass that I created. I'm going to pull one out. You got one. So this is just a travel whiskey glass. It's a custom 3-ounce glass, just made to take everywhere. But man, I get that. Like, as a small business owner.
Let me give you a little
Yeah,
commercial here.
please.
Because I know, I get it. Like, you've created this so it's easy for people to have proper glassware when they're wherever they're
Yeah.
going or whatever. I recently had to go and approve a blend at a bottling facility. And a lot of times you show up and they're like, I mean, you have no idea if the glassware is clean, who drank out of it last, if it was used as a sample for God knows what, whatever. And I mean, you had recently sent me this little glass, and I was like, this is perfect. Like, I went looking for it the night before. I was like, I am rolling in with, because all I got to do, I got to go in, I've got to approve it, say it's good to go. And so this little Bottle to Bond travel thing just goes right in my bag, right with me to the bottling facility. Sample goes in, it's perfect, does the job, we get it approved, and
I appreciate that.
I think it's fantastic. And
Thank you.
it's a great product. I'm a
Thank
big
you.
fan.
Well, ditto. So 2XO, tell me, how do you fit into the whiskey landscape? Have you
Yeah, I
thought-
mean, I think, just when, and I will admit that a lot of this kind of concept, conceptually, the thought process behind this, like, this was all started in my kind of ideation of what, from a liquid perspective, Kentucky Owl would be. we were sourcing barrels, right? We were buying stuff. It was different then. It was completely different then. You could buy 10 barrels of this and 20 barrels of that and 30 barrels of that and, whatever. A lot of times somebody had 200 barrels to sell. And then there were all these guys like Mark and I who only wanted like 20 or 25. And so you couldn't get the barrels until they had enough little pieces together to sell the 200, which is not the way it works now. The way it works now is you've got, like 37 seconds to say, yeah, I want that, or somebody else is going to buy it. So it's changed just a little bit. But, the big thing for me was I always, I want to be authentic. I want to be real. I want to be truthful. I want to be, proud of what I'm putting in a bottle, but I also want it to be mine. And I'm not interested in ever just taking, I think it's fine. I think it's totally fine. The idea like, oh, I'm going to pay somebody to bottle or to barrel this stuff. I'm going to wait 5 years. And then I'm going to put it in a bottle, and I'm going to say that I'm the master distiller, or I'm the master blender, or what did you really do to make that yours? And that was the challenge I kind of put on myself. And the way that I, solved that riddle, for lack of a better term, was really kind of fundamentally thinking about the development of whiskey in general and bourbon in general. And, go and taste this white dog right off the still, and then taste, 6 or 7 year old aged version of that same stuff, and start looking at how, like the transition, the transformation of this liquid, the development, what that oak interaction does to that barrel over 5, 6, 7 plus years, whatever. And to me, it was like, okay, if interaction over the period of maturation with one new charred 53-gallon barrel can be this impactful, then why are we not experimenting with additional new oak during that aging process? And it was a really, it was a lot of fun experimenting, like what's the right time to introduce this additional oak, all of that stuff, that was really my thinking was, more oak, more flavor, more viscosity, more weight, more mouthfeel, more balance, sweetness versus, to balance spice, like building all of this stuff with secondary oak exposure. And that's kind of what I started doing with some of this liquid in Kentucky Owl. And then, I found it to be so interesting and so much fun and such a cool and unique, I think, process that when I left, I decided I was going to build an entire brand around it. So instead of having some of the liquid that we double barrel or, whatever, like the entire line of 2XO from the Oak series, all, through the Icon series up to the Jim and Kentucky series, all of it is built on secondary new charred oak interaction during maturation. That's what 2XO stands for, 2 times oak. Everything has two times the oak during the aging process.
Is that the same thing when we hear the term double oak? Is it the same thing?
Now,
I know people use it differently, but is that kind of the same thing?
Yeah, double barreling, double oak. I think, you could probably split hairs there. Because there's finishing, which to me finishing means that it's a barrel. I don't know that there's a definite.
Sure, I'm just
maybe
curious.
this is finishing as well. What's important to me, very important to me, very, very important to me, is I don't use any second use oak during the process. So everything is new charred oak.
Okay, got it.
So So I'm not
Nothing wrong with
shade,
it. It's just different.
Whatever. I remember being at events and I thought that, people were going to come to blows. I remember being at an event one time and feeling like I was going to maybe have to step in between Jim Rutledge and Wes Henderson because, and I think I can see both sides of the argument. Jim says the law says, new charred oak containers.
Yeah.
That's the only way you get to use the words Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey.
Yeah. Yep.
And Wes says, well, we got Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. We just finish it in port wine casks. Jim's like, well, by definition, if it goes in a used cask, you can't, chicken, egg, whatever. Not my, I'm not, but I can tell you that in 2XO, everything, single is new charred oak.
All right. So it's my turn to give you a little commercial. I cracked this bottle today because we were going to get on this call. My son's going to be a little mad at me because this is one of the ones you signed for him. That's okay. I'm gonna come see you, and we're gonna get some more signed bottles. This is phenomenal,
Oh,
dude.
thank you.
No, I like this is good. I don't drink a lot of, as you drink a long time, like I think your proof kind of migrates up.
Mhm.
So I don't tend to drink a lot of 104. Like that tends to be a starter pour, but that's delicious.
What's interesting, and I think what made that stuff so exciting, the opportunity to work with that stuff, is that and thank you. But what I think makes that very interesting is that everything about that liquid is old school, and it was designed in a very inefficient manner. The set temps are low, the cook temps are low. Everything is. I mean, it's not one of these ripping off a whole bunch of barrels, max production, and actually that vinyl, for example, the bulk of the whiskey that's in there, that 35% rye stuff that's been double barreled, that is comes off the still at like I think it's 125, 126. It's a 120 entry proof, so you have very little
Goes up a little.
dilution on that end. When I dumped that blend, so there were 108 barrels, I think, that we dumped. The proof of that blend before we cut it was 109, and bottled at 104. So we call it very congener heavy distillate, congener heavy product. It hasn't, a lot of this stuff now is coming off the still at 140 with a 125 entry proof. So you got a, dilution there. And then you heat these rick houses and all that kind of stuff so that your exit proof is in the 130s, and you bottle it at even at 104. If those were the numbers, that bottle you have in front of you would be 20% water. But because it's 126, 120, and then 109, 104, you got maybe a thimble's worth of water added to that from the time it came off the still to the time it goes into that bottle.
How do you make
And
that decision?
that decision I did not make.
Okay.
Which decision are we talking about?
Like it was 109. Why did it come to 104?
I did make that decision. Okay, take that back. Yes, that is really where I landed when I made the first one of those, the Phoenix blend. And what I felt, and I was, it wasn't set. I didn't have that proof set. Same situation. And what I found personally was that 104 still carried all that kind of weight, viscosity, syrupy richness that I wanted. It took a little bit of edge off the back. But it was before whiskeys hit what I always call like a washout point, because there's a point where you lose everything on the front of the palate, and it just goes, it's watered down spice on the back of the palate. And I felt like, that 104 was just enough to soften it, but it still carried all the weight, viscosity, and mouthfeel that I wanted.
Got it. So you took it down just enough and kind of tested it along the way. I'm like,
oh, it's very scientific. I poured like 2 ounces in like 8 glasses, and I put drops in this one and drops in that one and drops in that one. And the one I kept coming back to, I was like, this is
this
it.
is the one.
It's like, oh, that happens to be at 104.
All right, I'm gonna have to send you a set of bottled spawn glasses so you have your ounce markers. No, that's so cool. Sorry, that's just, I'm nerding out. That's really neat. I've got a question. So recently, I have been able to try some like Dusties.
Mm-hmm.
I had not really tried a lot of Dusties, and I would have told you before I tried a bunch of them that it was like nostalgia. They weren't really better than today's whiskey. I was wrong in some cases. I was just flat out wrong. I tried a 1975 Eagle Rare. I tried a 1969 Old Forester Presidential Choice. And I tried 93 blends. Holy crap. Like, I thought blends kind of sucked. Not that blends.
Not that blends.
Why? Why did those was so good?
So there's a video out there that and I'm not saying that but it's great to listen to him talk about this because he's just such a nerd, but he's got such a heavy accent. Is Pat Heist talking about, answering this question?
Yeah.
But the reality is, and it's you talk about like Jimmy, like I'd be sitting there talking to Jimmy, and somebody'd walk up, and they're like, why doesn't new turkey taste like old turkey?
Old turkey was pretty amazing, by the way.
Sure. And I mean, there's obviously the way we produce has changed. Now it's all about maximizing production. It's all about how many barrels can you get out of that mash cycle, and they've optimized everything, blah 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 blah. You can, but it really comes down to like the setup of the distillery. I mean, you think about most of those products you mentioned and the stuff everything wasn't stainless steel that was sanitized every 20 minutes and whatever. I mean, these things went in. The fermentation tanks were big cypress tanks that just got hosed out. They were living, breathing organisms. They had all of this, these enzymes, bacteria growing in there. Jimmy Russell and my grandfather were very close, and they were some of our best customers at the inn. Used to come every Sunday for brunch, but he used to talk about how he's like, yeah, look at that pipe over there. It's about this big on the outside. Inside, there's only about that much room for that liquid to move through there because it's just so full of junk, and it hadn't been cleaned. Everything was these old copper piping. It was a living, breathing organism.
Gotcha.
And so many things that were now on top of that, all of those things I mentioned before, were different. We weren't trying to distill as high so that we could cut it, so we could stretch it, and all this kind of stuff. But the reality is today you want every barrel, whether it's a November barrel or a August barrel, if they're running in August, to be exactly the same. And they make all, the computers make all these adjustments to make that happen. That's just not the way that whiskey was made back then. That whiskey was.
That makes sense.
I mean, it wasn't all automated. It's like some guy had to climb up a ladder and watch a valve go, and he had to turn the thing and
taste it. Just taste
right.
it. Right.
I mean, it really comes down to. I remember when they were just Will and Wes had just bought Castle and Key, and they were talking about. What they were going to make there and everything. And I went out to visit Mary Ann in the lab, and it was still the original Castle and Key lab. I mean, it looked like, I don't know, it looked like a doctor's office from Stranger Things. Like it was dated, but they, at that time, like they went back in some old pipes, and they were able to like find like an active living yeast strain that was still in one of the, because that's how, nowadays, everything is stainless, everything's sanitized, everything's scrubbed, everything is.
Yeah. I got it. So I mean, much the way that
funk, when they say that funk, like that old funk,
that was funk.
It's funk. It's funk. Real funk. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like chain restaurants, right? Like they're shooting for consistency. Starbucks shooting for consistency. It may not be a great drink. It may not be a terrible drink. It's just kind of like, but you know what you're going to get when you walk into Starbucks. I don't think it's best coffee. I know it's not the best coffee. Like I can go down the street and get an amazing roaster, but it's different, right?
Yeah.
Because they're making it's craft.
Well, and I mean, it's kind of like you go to those restaurants that have been using the same cast iron skillets for 80 years,
Same thing. Makes perfect sense. So where does 2XO go from here? What are we trying to do?
I think that's a great question. Only because I feel like the last, maybe part of it's pandemic and what that did to the booze business and everything. But I've never seen the needle swing the way it's been swinging here in the last little bit, and what's happening at retail and with distributors right now, and all the crazy things that are going on in the out business world, but in all of it, it's just kind of nuts. And so my whole, during chaos, I generally say, hey, let's just kind of put our head down and nose to the grindstone and keep doing what we're doing. I feel like, we are, our approach is really focused, has changed a little bit, really focused on this oak series, the American oak, the French oak, the rye that I just released. We're expanding the footprint of the rye, but I feel like in the bourbon world and the bourbon American whiskey consumer, we're all kind of trading back to things that are safe and that are comfortable and that are easy drinkers, and that, the days of going out and dropping $200 and $300, just because your local guy says, hey, I got something new, like that's kind of changing. So my focus is really on working in the on-premise, so restaurants, bars, because I think that's our best way to get liquid to lips with these oak series, and that lends itself and transitions into people taste it at a bar because a bartender said, hey, you should try this, and then they say, hey, I've seen that at my local, that's really good, now I'm going to buy one, and that works. So that's kind of my focus is twofold. Is one on that oak series, American French, and then the rye. I've got another of those icons coming out. We're going to start blending that first of the year, and then with the Gem of Kentucky, we just launched kind of a single barrel program, a private selection single barrel program.
Tell me more about that.
It was a really hard thing I should say hard, like it's not hard. It's just, for me, it's like, I've been around this for so long. Like when you take you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, so I was always kind of reluctant to light that candle because I want to do that program, but I want it to be done correctly. And so we were very lucky, shouldn't say lucky, but fortunate. I was very targeted about where we took that, so it was a lot of bourbon groups, bourbon societies, we didn't do a lot at retail. It didn't do a lot, it's mostly people who have supported us and we're growing that. So that's always, I enjoy those. It's like, oh yeah, I got to fly somewhere with 6 samples to sit down with about, a bunch of guys that like whiskey and taste. It's not terrible.
I like what I like.
Generally tell people that the two things I hate about this business: 6 a.m. flights and having to write tasting notes. Those are the two things that I generally despise. I live about an hour and 20 minutes from the airport.
Okay.
So a 6 a.m. flight means I'm leaving my house around 3, 3:30. And then when they say, hey, we need tasting notes on the new, and I'm like, hey, I got your tasting notes. It's big, it's thick, it's rich, it's viscous, and I really like it. And they're like, well, we need you to be a little more specific.
I'm always like I'm tasting this final one right now, right? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I get oak and some of the like traditional stuff, but it's sweet. It's a little sweet. It's not like syrupy sweet, but it's a little sweet. It's got a little spice on it. It's delicious.
There you go. That's it. Write it down. That's
it.
Put it on the website.
These people who say like, I get 2-day-old leather. I'm like, bullshit.
My favorite. I do it all the time, and you could, just because I like to get a rise out of people. But I'll get in front of a group and I'll be like, first one, I'll just like straight face, like. So what we're looking for here on the nose is a bit of roasted caramel, some toffee, a little bit of toasted fence post, some caramelized giraffe hoof, maybe a little bit. I just start saying the most random, obscure things. Yeah, I'm just waiting for somebody to crack, and a lot of times, they're just like, okay, I'm following this, and then I end up losing it, saying, sorry, I'm just completely making all this shit up. But
I have no idea. It tastes good, right?
I know. And what I think is funny is you talk about like the things that make this whole whiskey world interesting and exciting, and I think it's like everybody's so excited, and I think sometimes we take a lot of people like me too seriously or whatever. I remember years ago doing this barrel pick at Four Roses with Al Young. Al Young and I were leading it with this group that was in, and Al was on this medication. He couldn't really drink. So he had, we all have like the 10 glasses in front of us, right? And so it's Al and I were just kind of like bullshitting, and there's the 8 guys from the group, and they're there and they're super excited and they're going through all this stuff. Well, Al he kept picking up his glass and he would put his pinky in it and he would just taste it like that because he couldn't drink a whole lot. So he would smell it and then just taste it with his tongue. And the longer that Al and I sat there and talked, and he kept doing this, and we look over, and these 8 guys, every single one of them started just putting their pinky in their glass and tasting it like that, because that's what Al was doing. So that's what you got to do, and so we just got tickled, and I was like, Al, put 2 fingers in there now and see what happens. Like, he started, but I think that like that's kind of what happened with tasting notes. Is like, I have to be able to articulate all this bullshit so that I can sound official and like I know what I'm talking about. And the reality is like it's good. I really like it.
I'm
It's
doing
okay.
good.
It's not my, it's
I'm doing good to get a note. Like
yeah.
honestly, like obviously Jack Daniels, right? I do get banana off that a lot. I'm like,
Okay.
there's some sort of banana there for sure. Like I taste it, I smell it, a note or two. But when people start going, I get 3-day-old molasses, and I'm like, I call BS every time.
Yeah, this so you get notes of dew on honeysuckle blossom, just just beyond a field of clover. And
Have you ever tasted that? That's what I always think. You know,
no,
like
so here's what I do believe. I do believe
okay.
this. I did tastings with people. Like 10 a week at the end. Well, we'd have all these bourbon groups and they would come through on buses and stop to do it. And this is not Kentucky Owl. This is not 2XO. This is like, I would just put these flights together and have 20 people. I had a tasting room. I have like 20 people roll in and we do a tasting. And I think that just, making up numbers, I think say 80% of people can get a note or two, but they're basically like, yes, that's good. No, that's not good.
Yeah.
Yes, I like that. No, I don't like that. This tastes, I don't like this because it's licorice and I don't like licorice. It's just,
that's fair.
There are this like, whatever, 5% maybe that are those super tasters who can sit there and rattle off, a lot of really random, silly stuff that no one can relate to. But I think that's real.
Yeah, for sure.
For a handful of people. And then there's this small number, whatever it is, 15%. But those people are associative tasters. It's not like I taste this. It's this reminds me of this. This whiskey reminds me of the snickerdoodles that my grandma made at Christmas every year or whatever. And like, actually, a lot of times those are my favorite tasters to taste with. They taste something, they're like, oh my gosh, this reminds me of the way that the back of the boathouse at my parents' lake house, and it's just like, I can't get there, but I love that that's where it takes you, Yeah,
it's amazing. Hey, I could literally talk to you all day. Like I could, but people
we'll do it again
forever. Yes, we will do it again. But tell me how we can get to XO. Is it in all 50 states? How's the distribution work? And tell me about
some version of 2XO is in all 50 states. That was always the challenge. The control states are the kind of the tough nut to crack.
I live in Alabama.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we do have 50 state distribution things. It's really good.
What about doing a pick?
What's that?
What about doing a pick?
We're kind of, so what I'm doing right now, I've selected them. I'm bottling the next 30 barrels of Jim of Kentucky. One of the things I wanted to do with this program was to have the product in the bottle. I hate the barrel programs where somebody, they select it and they're like, yeah, we'll get it to you in, 9 months when we can fit it into the schedule. So I'm bottling these. We're creating the list right now for those picks. And that's through me directly. I don't let anybody else get involved with that. So it's just Dixon at 2xowhiskey.com or my Instagram or whatever. But yeah, we're working through those right now and I'm excited to get that going. And
is Jim of Kentucky only a pick thing? Like you only get it?
No, you can get it. It's a general retail. It's not in Alabama, but we have
nothing's.
I tell you, so we got American oak.
Yes.
And on all the Alabama stores, and then so it was time to talk to them about adding French oak. And they're like, okay, Dixon, I can't remember what, I was somewhere, I was like in California, but I had to get on a Zoom call with the Alabama. Okay. And it's like, you got 20 minutes and it's 8 a.m. their time and all that stuff. And, so I was just like, I don't know how it works. You just got to impress these 14 people or whatever. So the only thing I knew to really do is, they brought it up. My team said, hey, good morning. Glad y'all are here. Dixon's on Zoom. He's going to take you through, French oak. And I just said, roll tide.
There you go.
And,
I'm an Auburn fan, by the way.
well, so here's what happened. 10 of them stood up and clapped and were like, hell yeah. And 4 of them were like, War Eagle, and we got
right.
through that. And I was like, I apologize, guys, but like you have a million people come in here and talk to you about whiskey. I just thought I'd, cut to the chase and see where, see where things were. And they're like, this is hilarious. This is awesome. So that's how we got French Oak in Alabama. Because
that's hilarious. So one last question. So Foolproof Life is going to be about, I really believe that whiskey brings a richness to your life. So long as you can keep it under control, abuse it or whatever, it brings a richness to your life. So tell me anything that comes to your mind about how this has just made your life richer.
Well, I mean, I can answer that a number of different ways. I find myself in, I am very thankful. I count my blessings every night that, with this passion project that I started once upon a time with a friend of mine, that it turned into something. And I it changed my life, but it also, created a situation where, I remember, I was 3 young kids at home and whatever. This opportunity came to partner with Stoli, and I thought, not many people have this opportunity to do something where if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, my wife and my children are taken care of. And
I get that.
I will be forever, and I know that's not like, but that's one of the things that whiskey afforded me personally. I also think that I echo your sentiment. Some of the greatest friends that I have in my life, some of the closest friends I have in my life, some of the people that I trust, to look after whatever, should something happen to me, they're all people I met through bourbon, through whiskey. It's a community unlike anything I've ever witnessed. Feel very fortunate to be a part of it. But and to me, there are cool things that have happened to me in this, like a great rating or a great whatever,
Sure.
But I remember I one of the first times this ever happened, I had a guy and he sent me a picture of he and his son with a styrofoam cup, little styrofoam cup, toasting with a bottle of Kentucky Owl Batch 2 in front of the window of the maternity ward where his grandson was laying. And he thought enough of something that I had created for him, one of the most special moments of his life. He took something that I created and made it a part of that. And like that, those types of things, they
next
just
level, right?
Yeah, they just hit different, and you think, man, this is really special.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to stop the recording here, but
No, my pleasure, man. Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.